President Trump, as we've reported, signed a flurry of executive orders as soon as he took office, but some of them will face legal hurdles. And joining me this morning to kind of break down these moves is Professor Harold Krent from Chicago-Kent College of Law. We appreciate you joining us. You also authored a book called Presidential Powers. So thank you for joining us to run our viewers through some of what the implications of these moves are. Let me start off by asking you, in terms of executive orders, what sort of power does the president have? Is this unchecked?
So the president has some limited inherent powers by virtue of his command or his ability to superintend the executive branch. But those powers are to coordinate the positions of the executive branch, and they can't step on the Constitution, and they can't contradict a statute passed by Congress. So we've already seen lawsuits, particularly against the Birthright citizenship order, because the 14th Amendment, on its plain terms, seems to say that that is how we define citizenship in this country. And so there will be a series of lawsuits. Some will be successful, some won't be successful, challenging this orders. Just to give you one example, there is an order against telework for federal employees, ostensibly to make federal employees more responsible and more productive. That's fine unless the employee has the ability to telework because of collective bargaining. And so if there is a union, and there are for most federal workers, or at least many of them, then they have a right to telework by contract. The president, by executive order, cannot override that. So that's just one example out of many.
Those are great examples. Let's talk a little bit more about this order to end birthright citizenship. What would actually have to happen for that to become a reality with the 14th Amendment in place?
Well, I mean, it's an interpretation of the 14th Amendment, the executive branch will say. And they're arguing that the intent of the 14th Amendment was to give people citizenship who are here legally, not when they're not under the illegal jurisdiction of the United States, but when they're under legal jurisdiction of the United States. It's never been interpreted that way. It's a novel interpretation. So since it's been challenged in court, the question will be, how do judges read it? Will they agree with the somewhat surprising interpretation or construction by the lawyers in the executive branch, or will they continue with the more plain language of the Constitution and its history over the last 150 years?
How malleable is the Constitution itself? I guess that's what I'm getting at here. It would take some kind of big-time change to that document, right?
Well, one of its strengths of the Constitution is that it's malleable, but obviously many have wondered at the Supreme Court because they have changed so many prior constructions of the Constitution. It's getting less stable. Over time, people will then have less faith and trust in the judiciary as a consequence. But that is what the current Supreme Court has done. If I had a guess, I don't think that they would agree with the Trump administration on birthright citizenship. But certainly in terms of the national emergency at the border, I think that they would agree with that. Certainly in terms of the order on death penalty, in terms of trying to encourage both state prosecutors and federal prosecutors to seek to the death penalty, there's nothing the Supreme Court would do about that. So it really is a context-specific determination of how solid is the constitutional principle.
Interesting. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I want to ask you about the whole TikTok thing. The Supreme Court just ruled in favor of the ban. However, President Trump issued a pause. So which other, I guess, executive orders could face legal challenges and which ones kind of won't?
Well, to use one example, the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico is symbolic. I mean, yes, it may cost some money for map makers to have to retool their maps, but the executive order from the Trump administration isn't going to change what Mexico calls the Gulf of Mexico or what somebody in Russia or England calls it. But even in terms of labeling the drug cartels as terrorist organizations, if the government then seizes money because they claim that the drug cartels are terrorists, or if they deport people without any kind of opportunity to claim that they're not a member of the drug cartel, they can challenge that executive order on the ground that it's unauthorized. And of course, the telework issue that I mentioned, I'm sure will be challenged. It hasn't been yet, but there are lots of contracts with federal employees that give a limited right to telework, and this would basically take something away from the collective bargaining process. Also, the two sexes on the passport, right? If you have a passport and you have an X as opposed to male or female, and you want the right to have an X, then you can challenge that and say that that is that was unauthorized for the president to come down with that order. So again, it will be context specific.
Thank you so much. This is very, very helpful for those who may have been watching the news over the last couple of days and interpreted this as unchecked power by the incoming administration. So thank you for breaking all that down for us. Harold Krent from the Kent College of Law. We appreciate your time.